Hi everyone. This is going to be a video response to a video by John the Other. Remember the days of video responses when you used to be able to put them right under the video that you were responding to? Back when YouTube made a little more sense? Back before censoring political speech that they seem to be engaged in now? By the way, if my face seems a little bit red, there have been a lot of local wildfires, and local and not so local actually, that have been contributing to a high concentration of smoke in our area, and it's been leading to headaches, and my eyes have been bugging me, and I can feel it in my chest. I got congestion. My wife says I'm coughing at night when I sleep, and I can't imagine, I'm pretty healthy. I can't imagine somebody with respiratory problems and that sort of thing. But I find at the end of the day, when I've been working really hard in the shop, I end up getting a headache, and I can feel it. It's raspiness in my throat. So that's what's going on there. John the Other had uploaded a video where he had talked about physical violence replacing, what used to be discourse, and the dangers of letting yourself be led down the path to doing that, and the dangers of what it means when people resort to violence instead of hashing things out in the marketplace of ideas. What ends up happening is ultimately what your opponent does, you will eventually end up doing. And if we do that, we end up doing that, as he's put it, it's going to be a continent-wide problem. Maybe we're going to be talking about a version of a civil war. And I think that's obviously very dangerous. A lot of people are going to be needlessly hurt, potentially killed over something like that. And it's one of the things that always bothers me when I see people actively promoting the idea of revolution, because revolutions have a tendency to be bloody, and it seems to be very insensitive and vile way to sort of gloss over, to hand wave away the potential that exists there for innocent people to be ground up in the machinery of the revolution, rather than to act like actually civilized post-Enlightenment human beings and discuss our differences in the marketplace of ideas, and may the best ideas win, which used to be the way things were done, in this sort of classical liberal methodology of doing that, of really being willing to debate and to have discourse and to understand your opponent's ideas in their best light, actually, rather than dealing with them at the least version of. Years ago now, on my YouTube channel, I had coined a phrase related to how people responded to each other on YouTube video comment sections and within Twitter and messaging systems, where I said, people who are attacking other people personally rather than dealing with the ideas, and attaching these labels to people as a way of automatically discrediting them, like racist, sexist, homophobe, bigot, Nazi, etc., etc. I said that we were misusing the tool, and I was referring specifically to the internet as misusing the tool. That here is this incredible tool that we now have, the Gutenberg press on steroids, a way for us to, and the fax machine shot into the stratosphere, a way for us to communicate as common people with one another and share ideas and debate each other and to form coalitions and that sort of thing. And when we resort to responding to someone by just getting down to some base tribalistic level of just pointing out someone's physical characteristics, or denouncing them, or again attempting to dismiss them by way of attaching a label to them that carries with it that automatic weight, that, well, I mean, it is automatic weight, although I would venture forth that, or I would put forth that I think it's mostly low IQ people who will respond to something like that, because the people that I know that have some modicum of intelligence reserve their judgment until they've seen for themselves. I don't believe anything anybody tells me. I need to see it for myself. I'm going to investigate for myself. And there does seem to be a portion of the population that's either, maybe it's not low IQ, maybe it's just they're radicalized enough that they only see through a certain lens, that they're easily led down a garden path. If somebody points and says, that's a Nazi, they're ready to punch the Nazi, right? They don't really care all that much to investigate and find out if this really is a Nazi, which I would put forth, there's no fucking Nazis in 2018. There might be white supremacists, there might be white nationalists, but there's no Nazis. This is a misuse of the term, and I think it's really highly disrespectful to the people who the Nazis actually perpetrated their acts against. Oh, how times have changed since I coined the term misusing the tool, because I think back when I coined that term, even just a few short years ago, the overall dialogue was a lot better than it is now. Sure, there were pockets of people who resorted to violence, but it seems that people have discovered these methods of dismissing one another, for instance, the labeling, and a way of further discrediting their opponents by inviting them to the violence, by enacting it first themselves. Some of this, I think, is a little bit of reminiscent of rules for radicals, you know, wherein you don't have any real principles yourself, but you demand that your opponents either behold to their own principles or even a set of principles you've invented for them. And so therefore, you know, nonviolence, you know, they'll say, you know, even such a thing as silence is violence, right? Like if you're not vocally for the cause that they are, and you don't dismiss and disavow certain things, that in itself is violence, but then that enables them to commit violence against you. And this has been going on for quite a while, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I would echo John the Other's sentiments that it's dangerous to be led into reciprocating that violence. Self-defense, I mean, obviously, I'm not a pacifist in that sense. I've never gotten into a fist fight that I've started, ever. I wouldn't do it. But I'm certainly not going to let myself get pounded into the ground. That's just not going to happen. And so I can appreciate and understand defense. But if you allow yourself, I think, to lash out in anger and reciprocate the violence that's being perpetrated, that's only going to lead to some very dark places. And I think we need to continuously demand the discourse, demand the rationality, because the everyday average reasonable people do see that. This is why I think that, you know, sometimes you want to make a dictator act like a dictator. You want Antifa to be shown for the actual fascists they are. I mean, that's what a fascist is, right? Is someone who attempts to shut down any political dissent and gain political power by quashing other people's speech. And that's what they're doing. I mean, these rallies are an absolute joke. I can't imagine the mind frame of someone. First of all, to me, if you find yourself with a large group of people chanting slogans over and over and over again that you didn't come up with, that someone else has led, to me that's mindless behavior. And if you find yourself dressing in weird, silly costumes and blowing kazoos and bullhorns at people and smacking things and trying to grab their phones and trying to damage their cameras, you're on the wrong side of history. And so sometimes I think it's better to allow the people, the bad actors, to act like bad actors, because they will be seen by the everyday average reasonable people. And they don't agree with any of that. The problem with the everyday average reasonable people, aside from the positive in that they form probably the majority of us in the West, they're not politically active all that much until they go to the ballot box. They vote with their feet in a lot of ways as well. They turn off televisions, they decide not to go see movies or different things like that. But they're not as politically active as even someone like myself who makes the rare YouTube video trying to put my ideas across. But they are the people who pay for instance, the police force, et cetera, et cetera. So when they see a group dismissing all police as being racist, or even attacking the police, they're not for that, right? They don't support that kind of behavior. And so when these people do enact this violence, it is rejected by the mainstream population, even if we don't hear about it all that often. They're quietly, I think, on our side. And by our, I certainly mean not conservatives, not the political right or anything like that. I'm talking about rationalists, peaceful people who wish to put our ideas forth into the public domain to debate peacefully, non-violently, and to hash it out in a peaceful manner. Philosophical people, philosophically minded people. The dangers, of course, exist when a lot of this behavior becomes condoned by the media. And this is something that I think is really troubling about recent events that have happened where Antifa has actually attacked even the press themselves, which I find really odd that the press would not defend the press against attacks by Antifa. I think sometimes these events put people at odds with their own group. And, you know, part of it is because the mob is never satisfied. This is why I agree with a lot of people who say, you know, even if you screw up, don't apologize. Just move on or whatever, because the apology will never be enough. They're not satisfied until you have been destroyed and your family has been destroyed and everyone who's ever associated with you is destroyed, and they'll keep going down the line. And that line doesn't end. I mean, the line ends in their rearview mirror when the mob comes for themselves, right? And we've seen this happen over and over and over again. This is why the left eats itself, because the mob is never satisfied. Everything seems to be a slippery slope. And so I think you do have to be careful philosophically when you give an inch as a means to placate your opponent rather than acquiescing to the better idea. It's one thing to acquiesce when the idea is superior, but I don't think it's a smart idea to acquiesce, to think that you're gaining some debate points, that you're gaining some, you're showing it's a show of good faith, because that show of good faith will not be returned by the far radical left. And I will say, you know, I feel somewhat vindicated here. Many years ago, before I even coined the term, I think, misusing the tool, I'd been involved in some debates with someone who was on my YouTube channel. And I bring this up because this is actually the only person who had been on my YouTube channel as a commenter and someone I'd interacted with, who I've met in person, who isn't a member of my immediate family or a friend that I already knew. This was the first person that I went to California, and I mentioned to this person, we'd formed a bit of a friendship. Hey, I'm coming to California, love to sit down for coffee or whatever. We met, I thought he was friendly. And at some point he attacked me and Dave Cullen from Computing Forever for talking about cultural Marxism. And he said, this isn't a thing. We don't know what we're talking about. We're just coining a term that we'd heard somewhere before that we didn't understand. And well, between then and now, with all that's happened in academia and in mainstream politics, really, with the Democratic Party and many other things, with the rise of Antifa and all of the other riots and things that are taking place, I feel very vindicated in that. And it's sad that rather than seeing that person, that I didn't take the opportunity to go and see you, John the Other, if you're still watching this or if you are watching this at all. When I was in your neck of the woods, I don't know if you recall, but we were conversing at one point and I was in your area for some other business and you said, hey, let's grab a beer or whatever. And I wasn't able to due to time constraints. I had a flight back out, but I should have probably rescheduled that flight, and it would have been fun to meet with you, but maybe another time. But getting back to the media aspect of things, I want to talk a little bit about Chris Cuomo on CNN, pretty much condoning the violence on the left, Antifa in particular. And he talked about a moral equivalence between Nazis and Antifa, and that there ought not be one. And this is scary for many reasons, but not the least of which is the seeming abandonment of the rule of law and presumption of innocence. And, you know, because, I mean, where has the rule of law gone? Where has presumption of innocence gone when you can just say, well, if Antifa says that guy's a Nazi, then clearly they're a Nazi, and so any form of violence is not equivalent to what someone else might do, say who is a bigot. And so we ought not basically reject all violence in the same manner because there's not a moral equivalence. I'm going to be stuck with 15 minutes on this video, so I will end it there. There will be a part 2 uploaded whenever I can get it uploaded. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for that.